The Ghost of Hanoi Highway. They say every war has its ghosts. But in the sweltering heat of Vietnam, one phantom haunted the Americans more than any other. They called him the Ghost of Hanoi Highway. This is the story of the man who couldn't be killed, until he could. The convoy rolled out at 0600 hours, just as the morning sun began burning through the jungle mist. 18 vehicles, 43 men, all heading north on Route 1, the main artery connecting Saigon to the demilitarized zone. Sergeant First Class Michael Cordero rode in the third Humvee, his M16 resting across his lap, eyes scanning the dense vegetation that pressed in from both sides of the cracked asphalt. It was August 1968, and Route 1 had earned a new nickname among the troops. They called it Hanoi Highway, though it led nowhere near Hanoi. The name stuck because this stretch of road, specifically the 15-mile section between Firebase Granite and the village of Phu Bai, had become a killing ground unlike any other in Vietnam. "You think we'll see him today?" Private Danny Morrison asked from the seat beside Cordero, his voice tight with nervous energy. The kid was only 19, fresh-faced despite 2 months in country, still believing that courage and caution could keep you alive. Cordero didn't answer immediately. He'd learned that silence often said more than words. Through the dust-streaked window, he watched the jungle slide past, every shadow a potential threat, every bend in the road a possible ambush. "Keep your head down and your eyes open," he finally said. "That's all you can do." But they both knew who Morrison was really asking about. Everyone in the 3rd Battalion knew. The Ghost had been operating on this route for 8 months now, and in that time, he'd become more than just an enemy combatant. He'd become a legend, a whispered horror story that kept men awake at night. The first incident happened in December 1967. A supply convoy, much like this one, was making the routine run to Firebase Granite when the lead vehicle exploded. Not from a mine, the explosion came from above, a perfectly aimed RPG that struck the engine block with surgical precision. Before the convoy could react, 3 more vehicles erupted in flames. 12 men died in less than 30 seconds. What made it extraordinary wasn't just the accuracy. It was the escape. A full company of Marines converged on the position within minutes, supported by helicopter gunships. They found nothing. No tracks, no shell casings, no sign anyone had been there at all. Just the smoldering wreckage and the beginning of a legend. It happened again in January. Then February. Then March. Each time, the pattern was the same: devastating accuracy, multiple casualties, and a vanishing act that defied explanation. Military intelligence scrambled to identify the attacker. Informants were pressed, villages were searched, surveillance was intensified. Nothing. By April, the attacks had claimed over 60 American lives. The media back home started picking up the story. "The Phantom Sniper of Route 1, one headline read. "Vietnam's Invisible Warrior," proclaimed another. But the soldiers who drove that highway every week had their own name for him: the Ghost of Hanoi Highway. Theories multiplied like rumors. Some said he was a former French colonial soldier, trained in European tactics. Others claimed he was a woman, which was why he could move through villages undetected. The most persistent rumor, the one that Cordero had heard whispered in a dozen different mess halls, was that the Ghost wasn't one person at all, but a whole team of elite North Vietnamese snipers, coordinated by Hanoi itself. Command didn't care about the theories. They cared about the body count, and the morale problem that was spreading through every unit that had to use Route 1. Men were requesting transfers, feigning illness, anything to avoid the highway. Those who had no choice drove with their hearts hammering, waiting for the moment when death would come screaming out of the jungle. The convoy passed through a village, clusters of thatched huts where old women watched with expressions that revealed nothing. Children played in the dirt, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the rumble of military vehicles. Cordero studied each face, searching for something: guilt, fear, knowledge. But everyone looked the same after a while. Tired. Wary. Surviving. "This is where it happened last time," Morrison said as they passed a burned-out truck frame on the roadside, a memorial to another failed convoy. Johnson's unit. 6 dead, 11 wounded. Cordero nodded. He'd known 3 of the men who died. Good soldiers, experienced, careful. It hadn't mattered. The ghost had found them just like he'd found all the others. The road curved ahead, following the contour of a hillside that rose steeply on their right. On their left, rice paddies stretched toward distant tree lines. Standard terrain, no different from 100 other stretches of Route 1. But Cordero felt his shoulders tense, his grip tightening on his rifle. Movement, 2 o'clock, someone shouted over the radio. The convoy slowed, rifles swinging toward the indicated direction. But it was just a water buffalo, trudging through a paddy field, utterly indifferent to the military hardware rolling past. "Stand down," came the lieutenant's voice. "Stay alert." They continued north, the temperature climbing as the sun rose higher. Inside the Humvee, sweat soaked through Cordero's uniform, stinging his eyes, making his hands slippery on his weapon. The air conditioning had died weeks ago, and repair parts were always low priority compared to ammunition and fuel. Firebase Granite appeared ahead, a collection of sandbag bunkers and artillery positions perched on a hill overlooking the highway. They'd made it. Another successful run, another day survived. But Cordero knew better than to relax. The ghost struck when you least expected it, when guards dropped and attention wandered. He'd hit convoys leaving firebases just as often as those arriving. No pattern, no predictability. That was what made him so effective. The convoy pulled through the firebase gates, and only then did Cordero allow himself to breathe. Around him, men climbed from their vehicles, stretching cramped muscles, lighting cigarettes with shaking hands. The relief was palpable, almost physical. "Sergeant Cordero, Colonel wants to see you." He turned to find a young corporal, barely old enough to shave, gesturing toward the command bunker. Cordero handed his rifle to Morrison and followed, his boots kicking up red dust that clung to everything in this godforsaken country. Colonel Warren Blackwood sat behind a desk made from ammunition crates, his face weathered and hard as the terrain he commanded. Maps covered every surface, marked with red circles that tracked the ghost's attacks. 57 confirmed hits, each one a scar on the colonel's record. "Sit down, Sergeant," Blackwood said, not looking up from the report he was reading. Cordero sat, wondering what could be important enough to pull him aside minutes after arriving. "You've been driving Route 1 for 6 months now," Blackwood continued, finally meeting his eyes. "Made 23 successful runs. That makes you either very lucky or very good." "I'm hoping it's the latter, sir." Blackwood slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a man, Vietnamese, perhaps 40 years old, with sharp features and calculating eyes. He wore simple peasant clothing, indistinguishable from 1,000 other villagers. "Meet Nguyen Van Loc," Blackwood said. "According to intelligence that just came through Saigon, this is our ghost." Cordero studied the photograph, searching for something that marked this man as special, as deadly. He found nothing. The face was ordinary, forgettable. Perfect camouflage. Intelligence says he's former Viet Minh, fought the French at Dien Bien Phu. Trained as a marksman, specialized in anti-vehicle operations. After the French left, he went north, joined the NBA. They sent him south 2 years ago with one mission: disrupt American supply lines on Route 1. "How reliable is this intel?" Cordero asked. "Very. It came from a defector, former NVA officer who knew Loc personally. Says Loc operates alone, moves between sympathetic villages, never stays in one place more than 2 nights. He's disciplined, patient, and according to our source, completely committed to his mission." Blackwood pulled out another photograph, this one showing a cave entrance partially hidden by vegetation. "This is where we think he's based. A cave complex about 3 miles east of the highway, near the village of Tra Vinh. Perfect position, high ground, good sightlines, multiple escape routes. You want me to go after him? It wasn't a question. Cordero already knew where this was heading. I want you to lead a team, Blackwood confirmed. 4 men, experienced, quiet. You go in at night, you find him, and you end this. No air support, no artillery. We can't risk alerting him. This has to be surgical. Cordero looked at the photograph again, memorizing every detail of Nguyen Van Loc's face. When? Tomorrow night. We'll provide you with everything you need, weapons, night vision, communications. You'll have 12 hours to get in, complete the mission, and extract. After that, we pull you out regardless of status. And if he's not there? Blackwood's expression hardened. Then we keep losing men on that highway until he kills us all or we finally get lucky. This is our best shot, Sergeant. Maybe our only shot. The meeting ended with a handshake and orders to select his team. As Cordero walked back into the brutal midday sun, he felt the weight of what was coming settle on his shoulders. He was about to hunt the Ghost of Hanoi Highway, a man who had evaded the entire American military for 8 months. He chose his team carefully: Corporal James "Hawk" Henderson, a scout with Cherokee heritage who could move through jungle like smoke; Specialist Robert Chen, a demolitions expert who'd grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown and spoke passable Vietnamese; Private First Class Marcus Webb, a Chicago kid who could shoot the wings off a fly at 300 yards; and Morrison, the kid who'd asked about the ghost that morning. Morrison was young, but he was quick-thinking and fearless, qualities that might keep them all alive. They spent the next day preparing, checking equipment, studying maps of the terrain around Tra Vinh. Intelligence provided what they could: patrol routes, village layouts, known sympathizer locations. But everyone knew that information in Vietnam had a short shelf life. What was true today might be worthless tomorrow. As darkness fell, the 5 men gathered at the armory. They stripped their gear of anything that might make noise: dog tags taped down, canteens wrapped in cloth, magazines checked and rechecked. They blackened their faces with camouflage paint, becoming shadows themselves. Remember, Cordero told them as they prepared to move out, Loc survived the French, survived years of war. He's not going to make mistakes. We need to be perfect. They left Firebase Granite at 2,200 hours, slipping out through a little-used gate on the eastern perimeter. The jungle swallowed them immediately, darkness so complete it was like moving underwater. They navigated by compass and memory, avoiding trails, staying off high ground where they might be silhouetted. Hawk led the way, his movements fluid and certain. Behind him, the others followed in single file, maintaining 5-meter spacing, weapons ready. Every sound made Cordero's heart skip: the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the distant call of a night bird. Any of them could signal discovery, ambush, death. It took 3 hours to cover the 3 miles to the cave complex. They moved slowly, checking every step, alert for booby traps, trip wires, or sentries. Twice they froze, waiting in absolute silence as Viet Cong patrols passed nearby, close enough that Cordero could smell their cigarette smoke. The cave entrance appeared exactly where intelligence said it would be: a dark mouth in a limestone cliff face, partially obscured by hanging vines. Hawk scouted the perimeter, returning after 20 minutes with a nod. No guards, no obvious defenses. Too easy, Cordero thought. The ghost wouldn't leave his base unprotected. Chen, check for traps, he whispered. The specialist crept forward, using a penlight covered with red filter to examine the ground and vegetation around the entrance. After 10 agonizing minutes, he waved them forward. Clear, but there's a pull wire alarm about 15 feet in. I can disarm it. They entered in tactical formation, night vision goggles turning the darkness into grainy green visibility. The cave stretched back about 50 feet, widening into a chamber that showed clear signs of habitation. Sleeping mat, cooking implements, boxes of ammunition, and most tellingly, an SVD Dragunov sniper rifle propped against the wall. "This is his place," Webb confirmed, examining the rifle. "This is the weapon that's been hitting our convoys." But the cave was empty. Loc was gone. "Spread out, search for anything that might tell us where he is," Cordero ordered, frustration building in his chest. They'd come all this way, risked everything, only to find an empty cave. Morrison discovered the map first, partially hidden under the sleeping mat. It showed Route 1 in detail, with dates and markings indicating previous attack sites. But one location was circled in red, with tomorrow's date written beside it. "He's planning another hit," Morrison said, his voice tight. "Tomorrow morning, convoy from Phu Bai to Firebase Granite." Cordero felt his blood run cold. That was a supply convoy, carrying ammunition and medical supplies. And more importantly, it was carrying replacement troops, fresh soldiers who didn't know the highway, didn't know the ghost, didn't know how to survive him. "When does it leave?" he asked. Chen checked his watch. 0600 hours. "That's 7 hours from now." They had a choice. They could wait here, ambush Loc when he returned, and hope to kill him before he realized the trap. Or they could try to intercept him at the attack site, stop him before he struck again. Cordero made the decision instantly. "We go to the highway. We stop the attack." They moved faster now, abandoning stealth for speed. If Loc was already in position, waiting for the convoy, then every minute mattered. They had to get there first, had to find him before he could unleash another devastating ambush. The marked location was a stretch of highway where the road passed through a narrow valley, with steep hills on both sides. Perfect killing ground, vehicles bunched together, nowhere to maneuver, attackers with high ground advantage. They reached the position with 2 hours to spare, splitting up to search the hillsides for any sign of Loc's presence. Cordero took the north hill, using his night vision to scan every rock, every bush, every possible firing position. And then he saw it. Not Loc himself, but signs of his presence: disturbed earth where someone had recently dug a hasty firing position, broken branches arranged to provide concealment, and most damning, a clear sightline to the highway below. He was here. Or he would be soon. Cordero keyed his radio, 2 clicks to signal the others. They converged on his position silently, taking up positions that would allow them to catch Loc in a crossfire when he arrived. The wait was excruciating. Minutes stretched into hours, each one marked by the gradual lightening of the eastern sky. Cordero's muscles cramped from remaining motionless, but he didn't move, didn't shift position. The ghost had remained patient for 8 months. Cordero could remain patient for a few hours. Dawn broke clear and hot. In the distance, Cordero heard the rumble of engines, the convoy, right on schedule, driving into what should have been certain death. And then he saw movement. A figure emerged from the jungle on the opposite hillside, moving with fluid grace that spoke of years of practice. He wore simple black clothing, almost invisible against the dark foliage, and carried a rifle slung across his back. Even at this distance, Cordero recognized the face from the photograph. Nguyen Van Loc. The Ghost of Hanoi Highway. Loc settled into his firing position, unslinging his rifle, making minute adjustments to his scope. He was completely focused on the approaching convoy, unaware that 5 American soldiers watched his every move. Cordero centered his sights on Loc's chest, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. One shot, and 8 months of terror would end. One shot, and 60 American lives would be avenged. But something made him hesitate. Some instinct, some warning that whispered in his mind. This was too easy. Loc wasn't moving like a man in his primary position. His body language was too relaxed, too casual. And then Cordero saw it, the way Loc kept glancing to his left, toward another section of hillside. He's not alone, Cordero breathed into his radio. Secondary shooter, somewhere on R6. They'd been so focused on Loc that they'd walked into their own ambush. The ghost had brought backup, insurance against exactly this kind of counter-operation. Webb, "Chen, find that second shooter," Cordero ordered. "Hawk, Morrison, with me. We take Loc now." Everything happened at once. Webb and Chen moved left, searching for the hidden second shooter. Cordero, Hawk, and Morrison opened fire on Loc's position, their rounds chewing through the foliage where he crouched. But Loc was already moving, rolling sideways with impossible speed, his rifle coming up even as he dodged. His first shot caught Hawk in the shoulder, spinning the corporal around. His second shot hit Morrison's rifle, shattering the stock and sending splinters into the private's face. And then the second shooter opened up from behind them, automatic weapons fired tearing through the jungle, forcing everyone to dive for cover. The convoy below heard the gunfire and accelerated, vehicles speeding through the kill zone, desperate to escape whatever trap had been laid. But Loc wasn't shooting at the convoy anymore. He was shooting at Cordero's team. The Ghost had become the hunter. Cordero returned fire, forcing Loc to stay down, buying time for his wounded teammates to find cover. Chen's voice crackled over the radio, "Secondary shooter located, engaging." An explosion shook the hillside as Chen detonated charges near the second shooter's position. The automatic fire ceased, replaced by screams of pain. But Loc was still in the fight, and now he was moving toward them, using the chaos to close the distance. Cordero caught a glimpse of him through the trees, no longer the distant phantom but a man of flesh and blood, his face set with cold determination. They exchanged shots at 50 yards, then 30, then 20. Cordero felt rounds snap past his head, so close he could feel the pressure wave. He returned fire, saw Loc stumble, but the Ghost kept coming. And then they were face to face, separated by 10 yards of cleared ground, both with empty rifles, both reaching for sidearms. Time seemed to slow. Cordero saw Loc's eyes, dark and fierce, filled with the same determination that had kept him alive through decades of war. In that moment, he understood. The Ghost wasn't superhuman. He wasn't magic. He was just a soldier who refused to die, who kept fighting because that was all he knew how to do. Both men drew their pistols simultaneously. Both men fired. Cordero felt the impact, a hammer blow to his left side that knocked him backward. Through the pain, he saw Loc clutch his chest, saw the dark stain spreading across the black fabric of his shirt. They fell at the same moment, the Ghost and the hunter, both brought down by the brutal mathematics of war. Morrison was there first, pressing his hands against Cordero's wound, screaming for a medic even though no medic could hear him. Webb appeared, checking Loc's body, confirming what they all could see, the Ghost of Hanoi Highway was dead. The helicopter came 20 minutes later, summoned by Chen's emergency radio call. They loaded Cordero aboard first, then surprisingly, they loaded Loc's body as well. Command wanted confirmation, wanted to be sure. As the helicopter lifted off, Cordero looked down at Loc's still form, secured to a stretcher beside him. In death, the Ghost looked smaller somehow, less imposing. Just a man who'd fought for what he believed in, who'd used the only skills he possessed to serve his cause. They were the same, Cordero realized through the fog of pain and medication. Both soldiers, both doing what they'd been trained to do, both caught in a war that neither had started. The Ghost of Hanoi Highway had finally been laid to rest. But as Cordero slipped into unconsciousness, he wondered if either of them had really won. Cordero survived his wounds and was evacuated to a hospital in Japan, then eventually back to the States. He received the Bronze Star for his actions that day, though he never felt like he deserved it. The nightmares continued for years, dreams of dark hillsides and exchanged gunfire, of a man's eyes in the moment before death. Route 1 became safer after Loc's death. The attack stopped, and supplies flowed more freely to the northern firebases. Men stopped calling it Hanoi Highway, stopped whispering about ghosts in the dark. The war ground on for another 7 years, claiming thousands more lives, American and Vietnamese alike. But sometimes, late at night, Cordero would think about Nguyen Van Loc. He'd wonder about the man's life before the war, about the family he might have had, about the dreams he'd abandoned when he picked up a rifle. He'd think about the hatred that must have burned in Loc's heart, the dedication that kept him fighting long after most men would have given up. And he'd remember that final moment, when two soldiers faced each other across 10 yards of jungle floor, both knowing that only one would walk away. There was no glory in that moment, no triumph. Just the terrible sadness of men forced to kill each other by forces beyond their control. The Ghost of Hanoi Highway became a legend in military circles, a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating your enemy. Books were written, documentaries filmed, each one trying to understand how one man had caused so much chaos. But Cordero knew the truth. Loc wasn't special. He was just dedicated, patient, and willing to sacrifice everything for his cause. In another life, in another war, they might have been friends. Instead, they were ghosts, one dead, one still living but haunted by memories that would never fade. The jungle keeps its secrets. The highway still runs north, carrying traffic and commerce where once convoys rolled in fear. Villages have been rebuilt, children who weren't born during the war now walk the same paths their grandparents walked. But if you know where to look, if you know the stories, you can still find traces of the ghost. A cave complex near Tra Vinh, slowly being reclaimed by vegetation. A stretch of highway where the pavement is newer than the surroundings, covering craters that once held burning vehicles. And in the memories of old men, both American and Vietnamese, who remember when death stalked Route 1 with precision and purpose. They say every war has its ghosts. Vietnam had more than most. But the Ghost of Hanoi Highway, Nguyen Van Loc, remains one of the most enduring, a reminder that in war, the line between hero and villain depends entirely on which side of the battlefield you stand. Cordero died in 2019, at the age of 74. In his final days, he told his grandchildren about Vietnam, about the friends he'd lost, about the enemy he'd respected. He never called Loc a monster or a terrorist. He called him a soldier, and in Cordero's world, there was no higher compliment. The ghost had been laid to rest 50 years earlier. But the memory lived on, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the history books that chronicled America's longest war, in the nightmares of men who'd driven Route 1 and survived. Some ghosts never truly die. They live on in our memories, in our stories, in the lessons we pass down to the next generation. The Ghost of Hanoi Highway was one of those, a phantom born of war, forged in blood, and immortalized by those who faced him and lived to tell the tale. Did you know about this soldier? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.